Yeah, Devin. Okay. Okay. I can do it. Yeah, get it to me quickly. I'm online. I'm online and my screen's on. Yeah. Good evening. This is Don Martin. I hope you all can hear me. Actually, our chairman, Dave Plyler, is actually trying to join. He's having some technical difficulties joining virtually. I'm the vice chairman of the board. I'm happy to call this meeting to order. I want to welcome basically all of you to our electoral districts education meeting of the Forsyth County Commissioners. Today, our meeting is conducted both in person and virtually. And Ashley Sloop, who is our clerk, would you please recognize the commissioners who are in attendance?
Thank you, Vice Chairman Martin. Attending virtually today is, of course, Vice Chairman Don Martin, and commissioners attending in person are Commissioner Richard Limble, Commissioner Fleming Elamine, Commissioner Tanya McDaniel, and Commissioner Ted Kaplan.
Great. Today's meeting is strictly educational. County Attorney Gordon Watkins and Board of Elections Director Tim Sichu will present information regarding the Board of Commissioners redistricting process. And following the presentation, a question and answer session will occur. County Attorney Watkins, you may begin, and he will introduce Tim, our Elections Director, shortly.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Appreciate everybody being here today. My name is Gordon Watkins. I'm Forsyth County Attorney. As the Vice Chairman indicated, this is an educational session about the redistricting in 2021 for the Forsyth County Board of Commissioners. First off, just some background. Who draws the electoral districts? The North Carolina General Assembly draws the districts for United States representatives, members of Congress, North Carolina state senators and representatives, and North Carolina judges and district attorneys. The Forsyth County Board of Commissioners draws districts only for the county commissioners. Likewise, the Winston-Salem-Forsyth County School Board draws the districts for the Board of Education, and the Winston-Salem City Council draws the districts for the City Council. So what we're talking about today is just what we have bolded there, the Board of Commissioners. This board doesn't have any say in any of the other districts. Later on, we'll hear from Tim Suji, the Forsyth County Elections Director. What the Board of Elections does, the County Board of Elections, they split the county into precincts and they select polling places for each precinct. The Board of Elections does not draw electoral districts for any race. That's not part of what they do. So, a very quick history of the current commissioner districts. In 1986, the NAACP sued Forsyth County, alleging that its at-large election of the Board of Commissioners was unconstitutional. 2 years later, in 1988, the NAACP and the county settled the lawsuit, agreeing to create electoral districts for the Board of Commissioners. The next year, in 1989, the North Carolina General Assembly passed a local act establishing electoral districts for the Forsyth County Board of Commissioners. The districts were designed to promote minority representation on the board by creating District A, which has a majority of black voters that elects 2 of the total of 7 commissioners. Because the General Assembly created this method of electing the Board of Commissioners, Forsyth County can't change the structure. The current board can't change the structure of how commissioners are elected. So what we have are 2 commissioners elected from District A, which is primarily East Winston-Salem, 4 commissioners from District B, which is the rest of the county, and 1 commissioner is elected at large. Forsyth County can't elect the commissioners using any other method. So the county couldn't use single-member districts. The county couldn't elect everyone at large as it used to. And it can't do any other combination other than what the General Assembly has determined. So here's a map of the current districts. As you can see, District A is shaded in yellow. Again, that's mostly east and a little bit of southern and northwestern Winston-Salem. The rest of the county shaded in blue is District B. And of course, the at-large district is the entire county. So as you all know, every 10 years, the United States conducts a census, and the data is released the next year. This year, due to the pandemic and other reasons, the census data was late. And so instead of being released in March or April, it was released on August 12th of this year. Pursuant to the United States Constitution, 1 person, 1 vote requirement, in North Carolina General Statute 153A-22, local governments have to redistrict if there is a substantial inequality of population among electoral districts. Substantial inequality exists if a district is either 5% larger or 5% smaller than the ideal district size. So what is that? An ideal district is one in which the population is exactly the same as the proportion of commissioners elected from that district. So on the next slide, I'll do a little math, which will show for the purposes of determining an ideal district, we only consider the commissioners elected from districts. So we don't consider the at-large commissioner. So we have 6 commissioners who are elected from districts, 2 of them from District A. So District A size should be 2/6 or 1/3 of the county population. On the flip side of that, District B should be 2/3 of the county population. The census tells us that the total county population is 382,590. So dividing that by 3, the ideal size for District A would be 127,530, and the ideal size for District B would be the remainder of the county, 255,060. So here's what we have now. District B has grown a little bit faster than District A. Not as much as in past years, but still District B has grown a little bit faster. So the District A population is 123,420. You divide that by 2 because they elect 2 commissioners, and the result is 61,710 population per commissioner from District A. Doing the same math with District B, you end up with 64,793. And the ideal district size is just dividing the county population by 6 is between those two numbers is 63,765. So what we see is that District A currently, as the current precincts that make up District A, it would be 3.2% smaller than the ideal district size. District B would be 1.6% larger than the ideal. So both of those are within 5%. And so what that means is the current districts, keeping them as they are, is an option that the board could consider. And so that's why I've labeled this option 1. And the options are labeled 1 through 5. They're not in any order in terms of which is better or worse. If the board wanted to make District A an ideal size, they would move from District B 4,110 people. And so if we look at precincts that border District A and share similar characteristics, there are 4 that are the most likely to fit, and those are precincts 033, 122, 601, and 905. And I've listed the population for each one. They range in size from 601 at 2,872, and the largest is precinct 905 at 4,961. So I'll go through each of those precincts one by one in order from the lowest number to the highest in terms of precinct number. So this map shows adding precinct 033. That is, as you can see, the northern part of the county. It votes at St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church. And here's a satellite image of that. The southern tip is Vulcan Quarry, and it stretches along the northern side of Patterson Avenue and US 52 and goes up along Germantown Road into some rural areas near Horizon Park. If you add that, that would yield District A 0.2% over the ideal size. The next possibility is 122. That is a precinct on the southern part of the county. That has been, Tim Suji will speak later. The Board of Elections has split some precincts that are big into 2 precincts, and so that's one of those. 121 was split off of 122. And so 122 will vote at Heaven View Pentecostal Church. And it is the eastern line of this drawing here is Peters Creek Parkway. And so you can see the Lowe's and the Walmart there, and it stretches west into more suburban areas. That would yield a District A that is 0.6% above the ideal size. The next possibility is 601, which is shown pretty much in the middle of the current District A, and that votes at Christ Moravian. Precinct 601 runs along the southern side of Salem Parkway, which we used to call Business 40. It runs from Old Salem and Salem College through parts of West Salem just over to Hawthorne, where the parking garages for Baptist Hospital are located. That is a small district, so even adding that would still yield District A being 1% under the ideal size. And the final possibility is 905, shown here. And 905 includes the northern half of Wake Forest University. That squiggly line on the bottom of it is the road that goes through Wake Forest campus. It stretches up to Bethabara, and it's basically between Renolda and Bethabara Road and University Parkway. And that would yield District A that is 0.7% over the ideal size. Another way of looking at this is to find some commonality among the precincts. This is a map. It's a little hard to understand, but the red is an outline of the current District A. The orange are qualified census tracts. Those are low-income areas determined by HUD. They're of a special importance now because you can put ARPA money to more uses in qualified census tracts. And so from this, the 4 possible additions to District A are cross-hatched, so they're kind of gray in this picture. So you can see that 601 is pretty much entirely in a qualified census tract. 905 pretty much is too, just a tiny bit is not. That's Wake Forest campus. And 122 is entirely outside of qualified census tracts, and 033 just has a very, very small portion in the qualified census tract. So this shows that 601, and at least by this measure, 601 and 905 have more in common with District A. So a timeline of how we got to where we are today. This, as I said, the census results were released August 12th. They were very late this year. Through late August, I worked with our computer folks in Map Forsyth and calculated the population of current districts, the need for redistricting, and options for new districts. September 9th, in an open session in this room, I briefed the Board of Commissioners on redistricting options, which was very, very much similar to this presentation. The next week, at the first briefing, I introduced a resolution to adopt new districts. At that point, the board wasn't comfortable with proceeding until they had held an information session at night for county residents to make sure that the word got out. And so that's obviously what we're doing here tonight. On September 23rd, again, an open session in this room, I briefed the board on the redistricting options. So this has been briefed 3 times already. And of course, tonight we're talking about it again, October 5th. That's tonight. We're doing the public session on redistricting. So that's how we've gotten to where we are. Our next steps, this Thursday, there'll be the first briefing of the board on a redistricting agenda item. So the way we do things here, most of you I'm sure know this, but we have 2 briefings and then the board votes. And so the first briefing will be October 7th, the second briefing will be October 14th, and then on October 21st, the board will decide whether they want to vote to approve new electoral districts. The second briefing, there's no public session at that where people can speak. But on this Thursday, there is a public session where anyone can either call in or they can come here and they can speak on any topic, but they can certainly speak on redistricting if they'd like to. So that's available on October 7th and October 21st also. The hard deadline that the board's up against is November 17th. And that's a deadline to have the districts done and report them to the North Carolina Secretary of State. In ordinary years, that deadline would have been October 8th, and so that's why I had it for an earlier schedule, but the General Assembly, because the census data is so late this year, they did extend that for about 6 weeks. And so, as I said, the deadline is November 17th, so the board has to make a decision before that date. And so that's my presentation. I'll be available for questions a little bit later. And at this point, I'll introduce Tim Suji, who is our Forsyth County Elections Director. And Tim, I'll let you talk.
All right. Good evening. My name is Tim Suji. As Gordon has indicated, I'm the Director of Elections for the Forsyth County Board of Elections. I did want to provide some context tonight in terms of the precinct boundaries as they apply to this redistricting process and what the county commissioners would need informationally to be able to do the districting process. As Gordon had indicated earlier tonight, the Board of Elections did make several changes to the precincts that we currently had. So we had 101 precincts, and just recently, the Forsyth County Board of Elections office had approved and authorized the splitting of 7 large precincts. And you get this scroll. So again, there were 7 precincts that had over 4,500 registered voters, and I'll go over the specific numbers for those 7 precincts. And in identifying those 7 large precincts, we realized with the data that was presented to us, we looked at voter turnouts by voting methods, whether it was by absentee by mail or voting in person on election day, or even voting in person during one-stop early voting. We looked at those statistics with these 7 precincts and found that in most elections, those voters predominantly voted in person on election day. And so in reviewing the data and making a determination as to what type of changes would need to be made, one simple way to explain this is picture, let's say, a precinct that had 6,000 registered voters. And if all 6,000 of those registered voters showed up on election day to vote, you can imagine the long lines that we would encounter at that particular precinct. And obviously, we wouldn't want that to occur at any given election at any time. And so that was sort of the primary factor in making the determination in our changes. So in redrawing these precinct boundaries, there are certain requirements that we had to follow, including coinciding with the census block boundaries in accordance to the shape files or the maps that we use. And then also we had to determine that the voting power and representation were distributed equally within any precincts that we would change. And this is based on population and to ensure that the voters can vote effectively and comfortably on election day. So in other words, avoiding those long lines. The board, again, had approved those changes of the 7 precincts and splitting up the 7 precincts. And so we would go from 101 precincts to now having 108 precincts. And we're now waiting on those changes to be approved by the State Board of Elections, by the Executive Director of the State Board of Elections. And upon her approval, the changes would then officially go into effect starting January 2022. So let's take a look at those 7 large precincts. Here's a listing of those. We had Precinct 11, Glenn High School, which at the time of June 2021, we had 4,875 registered voters. And once we split that precinct, it would then be 2,374 registered voters. We have Precinct 72, which is Southwest Elementary School, which in June of 2021, we had 5,944 registered voters. Precinct 82, East Forsyth High School, which had 4,657 registered voters. Precinct 122, Heaven View United Pentecostal Church, which had 6,375 registered voters. Precinct 133, Shiloh Lutheran Church, which had 6,083 registered voters. Precinct 201, Brown and Douglas Recreation Center, which had 4,744 registered voters. And Precinct 507, Sedge Garden Recreation Center, which had 5,354 registered voters. And so upon splitting those 7 precincts, it then created 7 additional precincts. And I'll show you maps of these splits once I go over the listing of these new precincts. So after splitting Precinct 11, which is Glenn High School, we now have the creation of Precinct 16, which is going to be at the Crossing Church. And they would have 2,501 registered voters. Precinct 76, which we've yet to determine a polling place, but would have a little over 3,000 registered voters. Precinct 84, which will be at Edgewood Baptist Church, would have a little over 2,300 registered voters. Precinct 121, Flat Rock Middle School, which would have a little over 3,100 registered voters. Precinct 134, Grace Baptist Church, which would have a little over 3,000 registered voters. Precinct 202, which the polling place would be at North Point Baptist Church, 2,454 registered voters. And Precinct 508, Linville Forest Church of Christ, which would have a little over 2,800 registered voters. So here's what the map would look like for each individual precinct that's been split So here's the map for Precinct 11 and Precinct 16. So you can sort of tell by the color of the outline or the shape of that precinct, where you have Precinct 11, which will continue to vote at Glenn High School, and Precinct 16, where those voters will vote at the Crossing Church. We've even calculated the distance between the two polling places, which would be a 6-minute driving distance, which is 1.7 mile. The split for Precinct 76 and Precinct 72, which we've yet to determine the polling place for Precinct 76. And then here's the map for Precincts 82 and 84, which the distance between those two polling places would be 7 minutes of driving distance, which equates to 2.8 miles. Precinct 121 and 122, which is 3.8 miles apart. And then Precinct 134, Grace Baptist Church, and Precinct 133, Shiloh Lutheran Church, which is a distance of 2.1 miles difference. And then here's the split between Precinct 202, North Point Baptist Church, and Precinct 201, Brown and Douglas Recreation Center, which is about 3/4 of a mile difference. Then here's Precinct 507 and 508, Sedge Garden Recreation Center and Linville Forest Church of Christ. So those are the maps of the 7 precincts. So again, upon the approval by the State Board of Elections of these changes, and then once these changes go into the system or they become effective in the system, we would, by law, have to notify all the affected voters, and we would do so by mailing out new voter registration cards. And here in Forsyth County, we also, out of courtesy to any voter, we provide a secondary notice. So we mail an additional letter to any of the affected voters of any changes to the precinct. We also are responsible for mailing out new cards and new notices for any of affected voters regarding redistricting with county commission districts, or even any other electoral districts. So if there are any changes to boundaries or districts, we are responsible for sending out new voter registration cards and notices to those affected voters. So just to give you some background information on the upcoming election cycle in 2022, we do have a primary election on March 8th, 2022, and the general election falling on Tuesday, November 8th, 2022. And I'm about to go over the list of the affected offices for that election cycle. But the candidate filing period will take place December 6th, 2021 at noon, and will last through December 17th, 2021 at noon. Early voting for the primary election will take place February 17th through March 5th, and then early voting for the general election will take place October 20th through November 5th of 2022. For anyone interested in filing for the Soil and Water Conservation District Supervisor seat, that filing period will take place June 13, 2022 at noon, and last through July 1st, 2022 at noon. They have a separate filing period because that is a nonpartisan contest. And so they won't have a primary election. They'll just go automatically onto the ballot in the general election. So here are the offices and contests that will apply for that election cycle. You have the U.S. Senate. You have 2 seats for the U.S. House of Representatives, 2 seats for State Senate, 5 seats for State House for those various districts, and then 1 seat for County Sheriff, Clerk of Superior Court, District Attorney Office, 1 seat for County Commissioner at Large, 2 seats for District A, County Commissioner, and 1 seat for County Commissioner District B. And then we'll have the Forsyth County Board of Education, 3 seats for at-large, 2 seats for District 1, and 4 seats for District 2. And then for Superior Court Judge, we'll have 1 seat that will be up for election in District 21A. And then 4 seats will be up for election for District Court Judge in the 21st District. And as I've mentioned, there's 1 seat for Soil and Water Conservation District Supervisor that will be placed on the general election ballot. With respect to qualifications to hold office or for any of those offices, 1, you must be a registered voter. 2, generally the age requirement is 21 years of age, with the exception for state senate where you must be 25 years of age, at least 25 years of age to hold that office. There is a party affiliation requirement as those contests are partisan. And so for those candidates wishing to file for any of those seats, they must be affiliated with their respective political party for 90 days, at least 90 days by the date of filing their notice of candidacy. So a perfect example is if they file on the last day of the filing period, then they must have been affiliated with their respective party by September 7th, 2022. Excuse me, that should be 2021. The filing period again is in December of 2021. There is a residency requirement for state senates. You must have resided in the state for at least 2 years and at least 1 year in the district. For state house, you must have resided in your district for at least 1 year. County commissioner and Superior Court judges must reside in the district that they're running in. And for U.S. Congress or for U.S. House, you just must have resided in the state. You do not have to reside in the district that you're going to be running for. That's all I have for my presentation, but I'll certainly be glad to take any questions.
Sorry, I was muted. It's Don Martin again. I just want to thank our attorney Gordon Watkins for his very thorough presentation of basically the process and where we are, and also want to thank our Board of Elections Director Tim Sisu for an excellent presentation, summary of both the precinct changes and all the requirements for voting, all those things. So we're ready now to hear any comments that you may have. Madam Clerk, it may be helpful for you to handle the online parts, and maybe we might do in-person first and online second, so that online people could get queued up, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Martin. We're passing the microphone around the room right now.
All right, thanks. We're going to do it again? Okay, it was mentioned before that there were 4 precincts on the border that share characteristics. You passed on there, and that's fine, but can you just give us a couple of leading characteristics that they share with each other you're talking about?
So a concern about redistricting is always compactness. So that was one of the measures that was looked at. Also, because District A was created to promote minority representation, the 4 precincts were looked at that would not dilute minority representation too much in District A. And then, of course, that last slide I showed you was the comparison with the qualified census tracts as compared to District A.
Right, so it's clear that those 4 do not share characteristics with the central district precincts of the 2 districts, or do they?
Well, I beliege that they do, but
okay.
It's certainly a matter of opinion. You may not think they do.
No. Okay, I get you. Thank you.
Sure.
My question is to the Board of Elections, Tim Sushi. when you split the precinct, and I was looking at precinct 201 where you created another precinct less than a mile from where the current precinct, did it ever occur that since you also have a precinct at North Hills School, which is still less than a mile from Brown Douglas, to move people from 201 into the North Hills precinct instead of creating another precinct? The concept of just moving people to other precincts that were a lot smaller than the ones that are large around it, did that concept, was that even discussed?
Yeah, all data points and statistics are taken into consideration. So as I had mentioned before, the original precinct, Precinct 202, Brown and Douglas Recreation Center, had an exceeding amount of registered voters. And so there was already a need to split that precinct. And so then upon splitting that precinct, we then had to identify a new polling place for the newly created precinct. And that is the new, I think it's North Point Baptist Church is the precinct that we identified that's within the boundaries of the newly created precinct. And so that is what's occurred. I don't know if that's what you're asking, but if you're asking why there was a need to split the precinct to Brown and Douglas.
Not why, but instead of creating a new precinct, taking some of the voters, registered voters, and moving them into another precinct like the precinct at that 206.
So you can only vote in a polling place that falls within the boundaries of the precincts. And so I can show you the map.
When you redraw the lines.
So as the lines are being redrawn or drawn for these precinct boundaries, just like what Gordon and the county commissioners have to do, they have to factor in data points and statistics such as number of registered voters, and they have to be, as I mentioned earlier, they have to be equally distributed according to shapefiles and registered voters and the like. So as I said, once you look at this precinct and based on the number of registered voters for precinct 201 and the newly created 202, there's a balance of registered voters. It's almost an even split.
I'd like to ask the election board director, the presentation that you gave, is it online?
It is not, because again, we're still waiting for approval by the State Board of Elections. They have to take these maps and the data points based on the changes that have been made to make sure that everything I've just said, that the numbers and the number of registered voters and the data points are evenly distributed in accordance to the law. And so they're looking at that information from a technical standpoint. And they'll let us know if it's not appropriate or not. And if need be, we could go back to the drawing board. But that's what they're checking for. So these are not posted online because it's subject to change.
Okay, but I was more interested in the sheet that was displaying the offices to be.
Now that information is posted on our website.
Well, I've been looking, I can't find it. I came down to your office yesterday and they couldn't find it, but
Yeah,
I'll
it's
try
on our
again.
website.
Thank you.
Yep.
I want to ask the other gentleman, if I'm correct, the equality that you're looking for is in providing each county commissioner with an almost exact number of the population that they would represent.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, my main question is how does that benefit the representational power that the two representatives from District A have on the county commissioners? I don't see where it benefit District A any kind of way as it relate to the governing body or board of commissioners. And so what I would say, in my opinion, that if we don't have to take them, then I would choose to not take them, because I'm more interested in us having 3 seats versus the continuance of 2 seats, which it has been that way for 32 years now. It's time for some true equality, that we might have democracy in our governance. Thank you.
We have 2 comments that were submitted in the chat. And I'm going to start with the first one, who is from Elizabeth Carlson. Why are you not suggesting that any of the following conservative-leaning precincts, which all border District A and have population numbers that meet your criteria, be moved into District A? Precinct 112, which is Walkertown Library, Precinct 63, which is East Forsyth Middle School, and Precinct 13, East Forsyth Sedge Garden Elementary, or Precinct 43, Freedland Moravian, a precinct surrounded on many sides by District A.
One of the concerns is to create a compact district, and as I said, also one that mirrors the current District A. Those precincts that were all mentioned would dilute the minority voting strength in District A, and they don't share as much in common with District A. Of course, there are any number of different possibilities that one could choose, but when I looked at the data, those were not, I did not consider them to be good candidates to add to District A.
The second comment that was put in the chat is from Jean Alsop. The League of Women Voters of the Piedmont Triad is encouraged by this educational session and wonders if the Board of Commissioners will reconsider the redistricting resolution that calls for open, nonpartisan, and participatory citizen involvement.
We're actually doing that tonight. So I don't know that we need a resolution for that. Obviously, the board can pass any resolution it wishes, but I will say that as I went through the timeline, this is the 4th presentation I've done in public session regarding redistricting, and we still have 3 more to go. And so I believe there has been plenty of opportunity for folks to come and participate, and I appreciate the folks who were attending here in person and also online. And as I said earlier, on October 7th, this Thursday, and then 2 weeks after that, on October 21st, there are public sessions. And if any member of the public would like to come and voice their opinion, they're certainly free to do so, or they could call in and do so.
We did receive one more question. Was the recommendation from the census report factored in the makeup of the new precincts?
I'm not quite sure what that question means. I'm having a hard time understanding what that means.
I'll read it again. Was the recommendation from the census report factored in the makeup of the new precincts? And then minority moved.
Okay. Census data was definitely used. Everything that I've talked about is from the 2020 census, and so that did report different race and ethnic populations. So yes, the 2020 census data was definitely considered in the proposals of the different options for redistricting. Are there any other questions anyone or comments anyone has in the audience?
I know you said that you looked at the census tracts and you looked at what would be fit better with the current District A population. I guess the question is, and I know that the population of the downtown Winston-Salem area, which is a part of District A, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I know that as far as the demographics of the downtown area is changing and is shifting more, is so you have more of a white population moving into the downtown area. That started before COVID, so I'm not sure exactly how it tracked out on the census. But eventually, as the population of our county grows, at some point, it's going to be where you can't continue when you redistricting, keep bringing in the same makeup of people. That's going to have to shift. And I guess I should say you keep packing poverty into District A. And if you start taking on like the precincts that were suggested by the online viewer, would it be a dramatic change in District A? Would it actually cause a difference? And at what point do we start looking at getting a third county commissioner for District A because of the population? Because at this point, if you keep it small, you'll always have two. And I know it's something that has to be done on the General Assembly side, but it has to start somewhere. And it would start within this room as a discussion, and then try to get your state reps and to go to the General Assembly to create that third District A. But if you keep District A small, then you're going to continue to have a 2-seat. But if it grows, because our county is going to grow at the next census.
As you indicated, any change in structure would have to be approved by the General Assembly, but I will point out that the demographic changes that have taken place are not an increase in white population. It's a very strong increase in Hispanic population, an increase in Asian population, and an increase in folks who designate themselves 2 or more races. Those are the groups that have really grown. Are there any other questions or comments? Thank you all very much. Appreciate everybody coming. Madam Clerk, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Gordon, I'll just add my thanks. This is Don Martin again. Thanks to everyone who attended tonight's meeting. And I will repeat one more time your reminder that there are 2 more sessions and opportunities during our open communications period in our county commissioner meetings on October 7th and October 21st for folks who would like to make additional comments.
Commissioner Martin, this is Commissioner Plyler. I'm a little bit late because high technology did not work on my iPad, so I'm on my daughter's iPad, and it works very well. I do appreciate all the hard work that the Forsyth County Board of Elections has done, especially with Tim and his crew, and with our staff, Dudley Watts. That the entire group of people have made this possible tonight, and they will make a lot of more decisions and comments to us. As you mentioned earlier, October 7th and 21st, when we meet at 2 p.m. I would encourage people to come to these sessions if you can. And we have 30 minutes where we allow everyone, or I hate to use that word allow, we want everybody to come in and talk. And you have 3 minutes apiece, and we're looking forward to that. So that would be October 7th and October 21st. Let us know what you think the problems, needs, and interests might be or are concerning the subject that we embrace tonight.
Vice Chairman Martin, Commissioner Lemaine, just to thank the public for coming out this evening. Participatory democracy is the heartbeat of our country, so I really want to thank them for participating this afternoon and making this a priority for their schedules for this evening. Thank you.
All right.
Commissioner Martin, is this the end of our presentation?
I was just going to say good night.
Thank you very much for the good work you did tonight, and thank everybody for joining us.